Hi everyone, welcome back to Human Anatomy and Physiology Lab at Clackamas Community College. My name is Christina Wallace and I am your instructor. Hey everyone, welcome back to spring term online at Clackamas. This is a video for Biology 233L. Every week I will make you a video like this that goes over the lab report just like I normally would do in school. There'll be YouTube videos. I will upload some slides and I will go to histologyguide.com and go over histology slides. I just want to give you a big shout out and a big round of applause for continuing on with classes here at Clackamas online. I know that it's a crazy time and it's pretty scary out there, and a lot of you are at home with kids running around and a lot more responsibilities and distractions and stresses. And so I will do my very best to make these lessons short and concise and interesting. Let's get started. I just want to kind of go over basically what you guys need to know about endocrine glands. So you need to be able to tell them apart. So how to tell one gland from another. So look for a couple of bullet points that describes each one, how they look on the screen or on the slides. Does it have lots of white spaces in between? Is it lobular? Is it just a bunch of dense purple dots? Does it have a lot of tubes, blood vessels and ducts? So be on the lookout for those things. Know what hormones they make. So some glands make just one hormone, others make lots of hormones. So you need to know the names of the hormones. You need to know the target of the hormone, where is it going in the body, and the function of the hormone. What is it doing once it gets there? You need to know the vocabulary for each gland that's listed in your lab report, to know the medical conditions associated with each hormone that are listed in your lab report. Not everything, just be on the lookout for those. Every medical condition associated with a hormone is going to be about hyper or hyposecretion, so keep that in mind as you learn about these. Okay, so here we are at your lab report, and so we're going to look for follicles, which are a structure. Colloid is the material inside of the follicle. Follicle cells are going to wrap around the follicle, and C cells are going to be next to. So para means next to. So here's the thyroid gland on histologyguide.com. You can see that it's kind of pink. There's a little bit of connective tissue stuff running through it, and there's lots of little pink bubbles that we're going to take a look at. Now we've zoomed in on some follicles. All right, so this is a follicle. And so you can see it has colloid in the middle, and it has dark purple follicular cells lining the edges. So all of these purple bubbles are follicles. So here we've zoomed in on the C cell. So this arrow is the histologyguide.com arrow, and it's pointing at this light colored cell right there. This is a C cell or a parafollicular cell. And this right here is another C cell. So you're looking for something with kind of a larger nucleus and that has lighter staining cytoplasm and is not one of the cells touching colloid. So not one of those. So on the lab report, you have to kind of find proteins what is the colloid made out of, and some helpful information will be found on page 402, activity number 2. And so sometimes I realize, remember to look in the activities for information. So for colloidal material and for some of the information in question number 7, you'll find at page 402. Diseases that have to do with the thyroid, check page 404 and page 412 in exercise 28 for some information about these. So our next gland is parathyroid, and we just have a couple of different cells to find, and then we have to identify the connective tissue matrix. So parathyroid is found on the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland, and so typically you can see some thyroid follicles in the field of view. And so I would expect to see some follicles up here. We don't really see any on the histologyguide.com, but know that the dense purple dots, if you see any follicles in view, you're looking at parathyroid gland. Thyroid is basically made of a bunch of dense purple dots. And so all of these dense purple dots, dense nuclei, are characteristic of parathyroid gland. We can also see the connective tissue matrix here, and all of this kind of stringy stuff is connective tissue matrix. We can also see some adipose tissue. And so if I move the slide a little bit, we can see a lot of these bubbles. All of this stuff is adipose tissue, and that just happens as we age. Our glands get invaded by adipose cells. Tetany is muscle rigidity, and so think about the hormones created by the parathyroid gland, by the chief cells of the parathyroid gland, and how that might affect muscles. And I'll tell you something, calcium is a part of that. The next gland we're going to look at is the pancreas. And so what do we have to find? We have to find islets of Langerhans, or pancreatic islets. These are going to be endocrine, where the acinar cells are going to do an exocrine function. And they're going to use ducts to get their product to the surface, where the islets are going to use blood vessels to get their product to the surface or to the destination. All right, here's the first slide of the pancreas on Histology Guide, and the first thing that I can see really clearly is that it's purple, it has lots of dots, it has lots of openings in it, or tubes, and so we're going to see blood vessels and ducts in the pancreas. It also has kind of this lobular appearance, so there's kind of like lobes in it. This almost looks like a lobe right here. So lobes and lots of open lumens, indicative of pancreas. Here's another view of the pancreas, and you can see all the lobes and all the white spaces in between, so it looks a little bit like a stained glass window. So here we are back at the first slide, and you can see all the little freckles, like all of these light colored spaces. These are the endocrine tissues, and all the dark purple stuff, all this kind of general dark purple tissue is exocrine. And so here I've zoomed in on a pancreatic islet, and you can see the boundary of the islet right about here. And so all of this is exocrine, and all of this is endocrine. So these are going to use blood vessels, and so you can see it's highly vascularized. You can see all these blood vessels in here. There are three kinds of cells in an islet: alpha cells, beta cells, and delta cells. You have to identify alpha and beta cells. And so alpha cells are really dark nuclei are alpha cells, and they make glucagon. And the lighter cells, like these cells and these cells, are beta cells, and they make insulin. The next gland we are going to look at is the pituitary gland. And the pituitary gland is really interesting because it's made of two types of tissue. And so there's an anterior pituitary that is made of glandular tissue, and there is a posterior pituitary made of neural tissue, and these are going to look very different, and then they are going to have different sets of cells that go with each of those zones, or can be found in each of those zones. And so here we are at the pituitary gland on histology.com, histologyguide.com, and you can see really clearly the neural tissue, the neural tissue is up here, and the glandular tissue is all of this stuff. So glandular tissue is much darker and redder, and the neural tissue is very pink, and that's because all of these myelinated axons running through it. So when you zoom in on the neural tissue, you can see pituitary nuclei and a bunch of myelinated axons running around. Now on the anterior side, the glandular side, we see bigger, poofier cells because they're little factories that make product, right? We have 3 sets of cells we have to find. Eosinophils, there we go, are these hot pink cells in the glandular side, in the anterior pituitary. Basophils are much darker, and so these cells are basophils. And chromophobes are poorly staining, so you're going to be looking for something that looks kind of ghosty and clear. And so there's a chromophobe. These chromophobes, just kind of ghosty. Their nuclei fades away a little bit, like this right here. You can't really see this nucleus very well. So the posterior pituitary makes 2 different kinds of hormones. So this is where you'll talk about those. And the anterior pituitary makes 6 different hormones. And so this, pardon me. So this is all about anterior pituitary, and there are 6 hormones. And so what you're going to do is you're going to list the hormone, like follicle stimulating hormone that stimulates the ovaries to make follicles. You're going to tell where it goes, and then you're going to tell the function over here. All right, the last gland that we're going to look at is the adrenal gland. And again, there are 2 major areas to the adrenal gland. There is the adrenal medulla, which is more in the middle and has lots of big blood vessels. And then we have the adrenal cortex, which is on the outside, the outer layer, and it has 3 zones that we're going to take a little more in-depth look at. So here's our adrenal gland on Histology Guide, or a piece of it. And so you can kind of see that there is a middle area in here. And then there is kind of this outer layer on both sides of the outside, and this is the cortex. All right, so zooming into the adrenal gland just a little bit more, we can see the boundary of the medulla right here. So this is medulla. And then the whole area above it, this is cortex. And so within the cortex, we're going to have 3 major areas. Zona glomerulosa. So zona glomerulosa is going to be close to the capsule and close to the outer edge. Then we're going to have zona fasciculata in the middle, and we're going to have the darker colored zona reticularis closest to the medulla. All right, so zoomed way in now to the cortex, we can see the capsule layer on the outside. Glomerulosa is indicated by all of these kind of globs of cells globs, glomerulosa globs. And so it's usually about the first kind of inch and a half towards the medulla from the capsule, zona glomerulosa. So the next zone in the middle is Zona Fasciculata, and you can tell you're looking for these kind of vertical fascicles of cells. So all of these vertical columns that we can see right here, this is indicative of fasciculata, and they're basically usually about 2 cells thick, 2 cells thick. That's what you're looking for Zona Fasciculata, columns that are going to be perpendicular to the capsule. And now we're going to zoom in on the innermost layer of the cortex, the Zona Reticularis. And so I'm just going to draw the boundary with the medulla. So this is the medulla, and we are looking for kind of these darker cells right there, and kind of, it's a little bit branchy, so you can kind of see these little white spaces of sinusoids going through the reticularis. They're not vertical like the fasciculata, they're just kind of branchy. And so you're looking for dark cells like this next to the medulla, and you're looking for that branchy appearance. That is Zona Reticularis. Okay, back to the lab report. So Zona glomerulosa, Zona Fasciculata, and Zona Reticularis, each region makes a different hormone. And so there's kind of an overall group of hormones, like a category name, and then there is a specific name or a specific example of that category. And there's a little mnemonic that I like to use to remember the hormones produced here. Salt, sugar, sex. So Zona glomerulosa makes a mineralocorticoid, and the specific name of that mineralocorticoid, which is the group name, is aldosterone. And when I think of mineral, I think of salt. And so Zona Fasciculata is going to have a corticoid name that has something to do with sugar or sounds like sugar. And then there'll be a specific chemical or a specific hormone in the group of those corticoids. And then Zona Reticularis is also going to be a corticoid that has to do with sex hormones. And last but not least, we have ovary and testes. Ovary and testes are actually endocrine glands, and so I want you to think about why, and we will look more at ovary and testes when we get to the reproductive system. So that concludes exercise 27, endocrine, and I will have a new video for you next week. Thanks.